Kingdoms in Conflict, Prologue, page 29, starting at the asterisks. Alan Davies strode into the office 2 minutes later, his normally bland face glistening with perspiration, his bow tie askew. The president seemed glad for an excuse to break off the discussion with Parrish. "What happened to you, Alan?" the president said jovially. "Those vultures!" Davies gestured in the direction of the press room. "They're after red meat. I couldn't get out. They were clawing me with questions." "Tell me about it," the president said dryly. "And if you have any information about who leaked the business, I want to know." "Yes, Mr. President," said Davies. "That's not my concern at the moment, however." He pulled a Queen Anne side chair up to the president's massive mahogany desk and began talking even before he sat down. "Ambassador Walken visited Ahrens an hour ago at his residence, conveyed your concern, and got no satisfactory response. Nothing. The old coot just sat there and said, 'You tell your president that Israel has never had a better friend than Shelby Hopkins.' That's the same thing they've been telling every president since Truman. Now, Mr. President, we need a tough note from you that I can telefax to Tel Aviv. It can be handed to Ahrens at 8 a.m. their time. I have a draft here, sir." Hopkins put on his reading glasses and took the sheet from Davies. His lips hardened as he quickly scanned it. "Paragraph 3 will have to go. I will not threaten any kind of military action against Israel." Hopkins swept his pen angrily across the center of the page. "You must, sir. It's all they'll listen to," Davies insisted. "That goes against my deepest convictions." Hopkins glared over his glasses. "And this could be leaked and destroy my credibility. Furthermore, it's unnecessary. Moshe Ahrens is a friend and a reasonable man." Davies started to protest, but Hopkins held up his left index finger and kept scratching on the paper, mumbling to himself as he wrote, "There, that's more like it." He leaned back and read through his revisions, then spun the piece of paper across the polished desktop. "Will that do, Alan?" Parrish knew Davies was steaming. Hopkins wrote well, often drafting his own speeches, but Davies wasn't looking for subtlety. He wanted a sledgehammer. Davies also knew, however, how far Hopkins could be pushed, and he shrugged slightly. "It may work, Mr. President. I'll have it typed up and returned at once for your signature." He inserted the paper into a green folder and left immediately. "Larry," the president said, "I want you to handle Hartwell and Slocum for me. Tell them I've read their papers and I'm weighing the whole thing. Hold their hands a little and let them know they're important. Tell them I fully understand their feelings about Syria. Call me if anything important happens tonight, but only important matters, please. I'll trust your judgment. I'm going to be in the Lincoln sitting room after dinner. I want time to think and pray some more, and I may call Dean Roberts." "Who's that, sir?" "Dean Roberts? He's a great old man I've known for many years, a theologian of sorts. He's been president of the Mid-South Seminary for decades. A real saint. I've looked to him for wisdom often when I've been at my wits' end. When my oldest daughter was divorced, I must have called him a dozen times." As Parrish began gathering up his papers, the president said, "Larry, I'm sorry I lost my temper with you. This has been a trying day, but that's no excuse." "No problem, Mr. President. I probably had it coming. Oh, and one more thing, Larry. When you talk to Hartwell, see if you can find out where this leak came from." 7 p.m., the White House, Situation Room. Parrish had a strong suspicion who had leaked the story, but he needed to confirm it and find out whether any other secrets were about to hit the fan. He descended the narrow staircase in the West Wing, moved past the basement security desk, then followed the long corridor toward the White House staff dining room. Beyond that, he came to an unmarked door and entered the Situation Room, the Security Council Nerve Center. Designed for use in World War II, the Situation Room bore little resemblance to its Hollywood counterparts. There were no flashing lights or electronic displays. It was merely a large room with open office furnishings, strangely silent except for the gentle, steady hum of computers. Men and women moved about in tightly controlled frenzy, transporting the paper that continuously spit from printers. Parrish entered the nondescript conference room in the center. On one wall was a blackboard, on another a global map, and on a third a giant video screen used for conferences with the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon. Parrish had chosen to talk to Hartwell and Slocum from here because it was absolutely secure. Soviet listening devices at their Hilltop Embassy in Washington could pick up most transmissions in the city, but this room was surrounded by an impenetrable electronic shield. At precisely 7, Hartwell and Slocum appeared full size on the video screen. With stereo sound, the simulation was so real that participants soon forgot they were 5 miles apart. A puff of smoke trailing from Hartwell's mouth drifted lazily across the screen. When he realized the video was on, he stared directly at Parrish. "I don't want to talk with you," he snapped. "I want to talk to the president. We need action. Tell him I must talk to him. We have critical new intelligence." Parrish deliberately spoke in a soft tone, almost too soft to hear. "The president understands the situation fully. He asked me to update you. He wants you to be fully informed at all times of our initiatives." He paused to let them sink in and then continued. "A very strong note signed by the president will be delivered to Aarons first thing in the morning. We believe that once he realizes our displeasure, he'll reject Surya's offer." "What are you guys smoking over there?" Hartwell exploded. "That's bull, and you know it, Parrish. Words aren't going to stop Aarons. We need action." Parrish calculated quickly and decided to risk a slight evasion. "We'll know what we need soon. It's 4 a.m. in Jerusalem. In a few hours, we'll have Aaron's response. We can then proceed to other options as necessary." Hartwell began to interrupt, but Parrish raised his voice just enough to continue. "The president has read your option paper and has it fully in mind." "Love you." "What's that mean?" Hartwell asked sarcastically. "He's thinking about it. Don't run that White House. We know it all stuff at me, Parrish. Come tomorrow. We'll be in a dogfight. I guarantee it. You tell the president the task force will be 60 miles off the coast. The 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, ready to go by tomorrow morning, 1700 hours Jerusalem time." "And we have an airtight op plan," Slocum added. "We can secure the Temple Mount in 30 minutes from liftoff." Parrish deliberately looked down at his fingernails until he had his anger under control. "Who authorized that?" he asked softly, but forcefully. "No authorization was necessary," Hartwell said. "Those are routine precautions." "Routine my foot," Parrish snapped. "Hartwell, I know what you're up to. The president doesn't yet. I haven't told him, but you should know you can't keep secrets from me." "What are you talking about, Larry?" "You know what I'm talking about. The leak. What a clumsy move." Watching closely, Parrish thought he saw Slocum flinch. "Are you accusing me of leaking sensitive military secrets? Because if so, not me, Al." Parrish raised his hands in a gesture of peace. He knew Hartwell would like nothing better than a shouting match that blurred the issue. "No accusations here. Just mind me from now on and listen to what I'm saying. You don't get your way with this president by pushing him into a corner. He'll push you right back. This leak has made a bad situation worse. It's distracting him, and it's fired up his fundamentalist brothers, too. They've been calling him all day. So don't try anything with those ships and guns. I'm giving you the word right now. The policy of the United States government is that we will not interfere in the domestic affairs of our ally, the sovereign state of Israel. Period. Until you hear differently from here." Hartwell blew a cloud of smoke over his right shoulder. "I know all that stuff State Department puts out. By tomorrow, the president will be more than grateful that we're ready for action when we have to be. So remember that, Larry, when tomorrow morning comes." "Now look," Hartwell continued, narrowing his brown eyes slightly. "We've got something new. The president won't talk to me. You'd better get this to him. You know we have a man in Aaron's inner circle, and we now have absolute intelligence that the decision is made. There will be a deal. Aaron's will go along fully with Surya, and Aaron's doesn't for a moment believe that Hopkins will lift a finger. In fact, he believes that Hopkins is sympathetic with them." He paused, waiting for a reaction. "Go on," Parrish said. "So they'll move on the mosque. We don't know when, but soon. The Arabs will respond. Their honor's at stake. And the Russians, God forbid, may come in. I insist that you inform the president of this. As commander-in-chief, he must know." "You're saying," Parrish repeated after taking a deep breath, "that the Aaron-Surya deal is confirmed. You expect the mosque to be invaded shortly, is that correct?" "That's it." "I'll inform him immediately," Parrish said. "I'll phone him from here. Call Alan Davies if anything changes." He punched a button and the screen went blank. Parrish wanted to get outdoors and clear his head with some fresh air. He wanted to see his wife and kids. He had eaten only a sandwich for lunch hours ago, yet he felt uncomfortably bloated. He reached for a telephone, but the operator couldn't put his call through. The president was still on the phone with Dean Roberts, she explained. 7:25 p.m., the Lincoln sitting room. "Dean, Slow down if you don't mind. I'm taking notes. The president was seated in a yellow brocade easy chair with the phone cradled against his ear. An open Bible lay on the table next to him. The first principle, if I might summarize, is that we must stand with the Jews. Genesis 12:3. Yes, yes. He scribbled a sentence on a yellow legal pad propped against his right knee. And it doesn't matter whether the Israeli government truly believes or whether they're non-believing militant nationalists. The point is that Israel today is the biblical nation to which Jesus returns. At that point, the door swung open. The Secret Service would admit only his wife or Parrish without advance permissions, so Hopkins scarcely looked up. And point 2, God has been kind to America because America has been kind to the Jews. The president motioned for Parrish to sit down. And you say it is clear in Ezekiel and Daniel that the attack will come on Israel from Russia. Parrish stared at the deep pile carpet. His stomach was beginning to churn. This conversation, on top of the information Hartwell had just given him, was making the ache in his stomach a dull, dead weight. So you believe the 1967 war was a signal of sorts? That is, that God was declaring Israel's military victory over Jerusalem? I see. I hadn't really thought about that before. Again, Hopkins motioned for Parrish to sit down. Then point number 4 is that Jews must redeem the land. Is that the word? Redeem? I see. So rebuilding the temple would be the final step, along with the preaching the gospel to all the world. Well, we're finally doing that with all our satellites and radio antennas. He was writing furiously now. Yes. Oh, I think I know all that pretty well. The rapture and the tribulation and yes, right, Armageddon, which would be just about the end of the story, right? I mean, as far as these events are concerned. Hopkins was beaming, nodding his head at Parrish. Well, Dean, I can't tell you how much this has helped me. I'm familiar with all this from my own reading and Bible study, of course, but you give me a succinct summary. This puts it together step by step. Yes, Dean, you do that. Pray that God will give me wisdom. I understand. Yes, call me if you have any leading of any kind. God bless you, Dean. Parrish wished he could disappear before the president put down the receiver. That was my old friend, Dean Roberts, the president explained. A brilliant mind. At 83, he's still razor sharp. Yes, sir, Parrish said. The enthusiasm on Hopkins' face drained away slowly as he confronted his aide's grim expression. Larry, don't yes, sir, me. Say what's on your mind. I don't know what's on my mind, Mr. President. Frankly, sir, you're scaring me to death. You mean that, don't you, Larry? The president stood, half turned away, then whirled back to face him. I didn't think anything could ruffle you. Tell me why. I don't know how to explain it if you can't see it for yourself, sir, Parrish replied. You're responsible for hundreds of millions of lives, including mine, including my wife and kids, and you seem to be guiding us by some obscure, kooky theory about the end of the world. What if the obscure, kooky theory happens to be true? I'm happy to leave that decision up to God. The end of the world is his business. Our business here in the White House is to prevent the end of the world. Well, according to my theology, Larry, the end of the world, Parrish interrupted something he never would have done had he not been deeply distressed. Your theology is irrelevant right now. You weren't elected to be the nation's theologian. Hopkins was visibly shocked by his aide's words. He turned and walked over to the window and looked out across the south lawn at the Washington Monument, floodlit against the darkened sky. Larry, you remember what I said in the campaign? America needs a president who will speak for God as well as for the American people. The people voted for me and for that, so maybe in a sense they did elect me to be their theologian. You know better than that, sir. Not 5% of them know what the word theology means. They elected you because you were moral and upright, have one wife, nice kids, and speak soothingly on TV. And they were fed up to hear with anti-family, anti-God, anti-everything except the orca whale. So they decided to trust you, Shelby. Parrish had never before called the president by his first name. They trust you. You can't betray them. But I only avoid that if I keep trust with God. Then keep us out of a war. Surely God did not put you here to cheer on the Israelis while they blunder into World War III. Hartwell has information that Surya and Aarons have reached an agreement. If we don't stop them with our Marines, they'll destroy the mosque, probably within the next 24 hours. We have to move militarily or there'll be war. No, Hopkins said vehemently. I will not lift a hand against God's chosen people. Then you shouldn't have taken that oath last year, Mr. President. You didn't promise you'd defend us against anybody but God's chosen people. You said you'd defend the Constitution. Period. And, by the way, Parrish said, looking at his watch, the fleet will be off the coast of Israel in about 12 hours. Who ordered that? Hopkins demanded, taking off his watch to chafe the inside of his wrist. Hartwell said it was a routine precaution. Routine, my foot. That's what I said. But at least it keeps your options open. Hopkins accepted that with a grunt and dropped into the yellow chair again, stretching out his legs and running his fingers through his hair. By the way, did you learn anything about the leak? Parrish hesitated. Nothing solid, sir, but I suspect Hartwell was behind it. The president accepted that too with a grunt, his mind obviously elsewhere. Parrish wondered whether he should leave. The truth is, Larry, I'm not sure what to think, Hopkins said gloomily. You're talking political sense, and my Christian friends are talking another kind of sense. It's almost as though two worlds are colliding here, and I'm in the middle. I wouldn't say this to anyone but you, but maybe I just don't belong in this place. For the first time, Parrish saw a hint of weakness in Hopkins' eyes, an almost pleading look. Larry, the president's voice was tentative, hesitant. Larry, how did we ever get into this mess? He sat forward, took a deep breath as if drawing on hidden reserves, and smiled. Well, I guess we've done what we can for tonight. Aarons will get my letter shortly, and the fleet, you say, is moving. Why don't you go home and spend some time with your family, Larry? It's been a long, frustrating day. Let's pray tomorrow is better. 3 a.m., Georgetown. The phone woke Parrish, the special secure phone. It rang 5 times while he tried to straighten the confusing shapes in his head. He was always slow to waken. Finally, his wife sat up in bed and turned on the light. Why don't you answer it? She asked. He picked up the receiver and heard Alan Davies' monotone. Larry, the Soviets have put their Middle East forces on alert. He sounded as though he were reporting the daily amount of rainfall. We received the first reports half an hour ago. I waited for confirmation before I called you. Thanks, Alan. What do you suggest? The problem is to know what they're thinking. My best guess is that they're responding to our ships heading toward Israel. They've probably misinterpreted that as a sign of hostility. By this time, Parrish had fumbled a small notepad out of a drawer and was scribbling notes. His heart was pounding, and he had to force the edge out of his voice. The two men talked tersely for 5 minutes about possible options. When they finished, Parrish called the president. Hopkins answered on the first ring. His voice sounded fresh and awake. Mr. President, Parrish began, I must inform you that the Soviets have put their Middle East forces on alert. He waited through the silence, suddenly remembering that Hopkins had assigned the Soviets a role in biblical prophecy. Was the president hearing echoes of eternity in the news? But the response was commonplace. What are the Russians up to, then? That's guesswork at this point, Mr. President. Davies' guess is that they've misinterpreted our fleet's movement toward Israel. Well, then, first thing to do is to set their ambassador at ease. Don't you think? Have Davies call their ambassador and tell him that our movements ought not to be misinterpreted as aggressive. Don't you think that's a good idea? Yes, sir, I do. In fact, that was one thing Davies suggested. Then let's do it. What else did Davies have in mind? He thought we should put our forces on alert and response, just in case the Soviets have something aggressive in mind themselves. We want to be ready to respond. Yes, we surely do, the president said. But might that too be misunderstood by the Soviets? It could be, Parrish admitted. We could cover that in our call too. Which assumes, doesn't it, that they believe what we say, which, if they trust us as much as we trust them, isn't very likely. But we can't be caught with our pants down. Let's go on alert and have Davies get on that call immediately. Anything else, Larry? No, sir. No word on a response from Aarons, is there? Nothing so far. Well, let's all meet at 6 a.m. Make it the Oval Office. Doesn't matter now. Hartwell, Slocum, Lovelace, Davies, you and me. Larry, are you still scared? I've been praying for you and your family. Thank you, sir. No, I guess I'm not scared, he lied. Well, good. The Lord has been speaking to me, telling me there is no need to be afraid. When this is all over, we're going to praise him for the magnificent wonders he has wrought. Be of good courage. That's the Lord's message to us both.